And we are live. Great. All right. So I'm super excited to be here today with Matthias Imbach, co-founder and CEO at Sygnum. Very excited to have you here and dive into a little bit of the questioning around you and the journey and all kinds of things around digital and digital business and growth. And so welcome, Matthias. Really happy to have you here.
Thank you. It's great to be here, and thanks for inviting me.
My pleasure. So maybe you can say a few words about yourself before we dive right in.
Sure. I'm Matthias, one of the co-founders and group CEO of Sygnum, and Sygnum is you can think of us as a crypto digital asset specialist with a banking license in Switzerland and also in Singapore. Really, that fully regulated approach with an all-in-one account approach to digital assets, crypto, stablecoin, asset tokens. But otherwise, interesting maybe about myself. I actually now was co-founding and heading a bank, but have never worked in banking before. On the contrary, have managed a family office of Indian industrialist Ratan Tata before, and before was in consulting with Bain Company. So have really gone from a very libertarian on the private side, figuring out what crypto means, into then realizing future has heritage, and then this leading to the establishment of Sygnum. So that's been in very short my journey.
Thank you for sharing, Matthias. Really appreciate it. So yeah, let's dive right in. So my first question that I have to is, if you had to sum up your essence in just one word, what would that word be and why?
My essence, personal essence. That's it's difficult, but at least I can also say the why, so then can elaborate a bit because you may be surprised. So one word or one element that just, if I think about my career, but also personally and professionally, that just kind of keeps on coming up is persistence, because I think persistence has given me the chance to actually be free and to do what I enjoy doing, and as a result also to be happy. Persistence to me is important both in private life and professionally, because I think it's just when you do something persistently and consistently, it leads to ultimately trust, because people see that you do that, and it helps you. If you see things through, also particularly the difficult ones, and people around you see this, you're automatically over time, I feel you're surrounded or you interact with people that are like-minded and see it that way as well, and out of that trust is being created, and in a context of a company that leads then also to culture, and so if I had to, I would really say persistence. It goes also back to a story very early in my career, or actually during studies, where I was sent to India during this is, it's called the International Students Committees and Gallen Symposium, where I was sent to India, and then I had to get access to all these CEOs and chairmen. That's actually how I met Mr. Tata then, and many years later then worked for him and helped him set up RNT Associates. So what I realized there very fast is, without friendly persistence, you will never succeed. That was then also on my report to my successor, kind of on the front page, and I think that has just stayed with me throughout life.
I love that. Friendly persistence. I love that. Great. Thank you so much for sharing that. Now, I want to talk a little bit about success. Specifically, I would love to hear, what is your personal definition of success?
I think it has a lot to do with me being able to be myself always. It has to do with, I call it the sunshine test. It's that I can go through life, that whatever I do and the decisions I take, ultimately, if they were to be published on the front page of a newspaper the next day, I always ask myself the question, every day actually I do this, would I have to feel ashamed? And as long as you don't have to feel ashamed, it opens up that freedom to make mistakes, which I think is important in entrepreneurship, and also as you build a culture of a company. So the second thing is the definition of success, if the sunshine test works. for me. And also, if I just have the privilege of giving it my all for something I truly believe in, and that I can, and then maybe lastly, if more often than not I'm dealing with or work with people I like and enjoy working with, and that is honestly how I would define success for myself.
I love how concise, but also how deep it is. Thank you for sharing that. Really, really cool. Now, I'd love to talk a little bit about decisions. Making easy decisions is easy, right? Making hard decisions can be hard. And I'm just like curious, like, what is one of the most difficult decisions that you ever had to make or ever had to make so far?
Yeah, I would say both the easiest or kind of the most fun and the most difficult decisions are always related to people. And when I define fun versus difficult, I mean also for me as a human being, the level of energy it gives or it drains. In terms of difficulty, also measured by the energy it takes from me. And I can say that just also in the Sygnum journey, whenever there were situations which were people related, decisions to have to let go someone, for example, because of breach of values or perceived there's integrity issues or so, or also disappointments, being disappointed by people on this journey, and then having to conclude to not work with such a person or partner, etc. It can be different things, but it's always related to people. But then on the contrary, also at the same time, the most fun and the most positive and the most energy compounding decisions were equally driven by people, so people related. So I think it's really both sides, just the extremes.
Thanks for sharing. Appreciate it. Now, I want to talk a little bit about the future, specifically about the industry, but then also in the context of Sygnum. So, the industry, where do you see the industry going in the next couple of years? And then also, how does Sygnum fit into that context?
So the industry is in a very difficult phase right now. It's a kind of at the crossroads, kind of at a redefining itself kind of moment on the back of the significant crisis that unfolded last year with the many crashes and the trust that has really been shattered. And I think there's no talking this away. It's just a fact. And I think it's now this moment or what I wish for the industry is that we can continue focus, which actually also has happened last year. It's just not been talked about it, on developing and improving the infrastructure that is allowing for the Web3 future that we all believe in a future where those creating network effects should also benefit from network effects. And so I wish for the industry to get a chance and to also be smart about rebuilding trust, about managing the various stakeholders that need to be managed and convinced in that process. In particular, also for us, of course, relevant, the regulators, the international regulatory landscape, what are the frameworks that will be used to, within which the crypto industry can operate. And there we're at the very critical point. Right now, we're in the crackdown phase where, some regulators do regulation by enforcements, other already have regulatory frameworks such as Switzerland. The EU, for example, is about to put in place more clarity. So I just wish for this to kind of come out in a balanced fashion, and that the industry manages to rebuild trust and to focus attention on the real use cases and how blockchain and Web3 can actually do good for people. And then this applied to Sygnum is obviously we have the ambition to play a very significant role in bringing trust to this industry, and in also helping the many players, combine this traditional finance with future finance, as we call it, and to play at that interface and understanding both worlds, hopefully making it a bit easier to then drive the next phase of real adoption. That is kind of the market view. And then for me, what I wish for the company, kind of more from an inside view, is just that we can keep our values as we grow, or sign values which are so important to us, that we keep on being a team that just enjoys working with each other, but also is perceived, I feel, as professional and people also, or clients and partners, enjoy working with. So that would be my wish for the company.
Thanks for sharing. I love how, in the future, like the context of Sygnum fits so incredibly well into this, because like something that you mentioned so many times is the word trust. And for me, it's very interesting and fascinating how the word trust has become, or maybe has always been, but even more these days than ever before, is an integral part of the future of where we are going. Because, it could be the destruction of this industry, or it could be basically what, the foundation of what we build it on. And I love that you brought this topic up, trust, because I also feel like when it comes to the context of Sygnum plays a very significant role when it comes to trust. I mean, we've seen it over the past, months and months when it comes to like how money has flowed from which places to which, right? And it's just like interesting how money pursues trust. I find it very fascinating. And,
Yes.
thanks for sharing that. So let's talk a little bit about digital business, digital growth, experience as well. Starting maybe with customer experience in general. What do you personally define as great customer experience?
To define customer experience, I would like to take the lens of the customer itself. And if I then want to define what that means, I would say great customer experience in whatever industry, it doesn't matter, is if the client doesn't just come back and keeps on using the service or going through that customer experience, but also positively and proactively talks about it, or even refers and brings new clients on the basis of talking about the very user experience. So that for me is probably how I would define it. And maybe the second element for me, great customer experience, which I think can also be singled out, or at least out of my experience, is it's multi-channel. It's not just you have an app or you have a flow on the website or whatever that is just beautifully designed and seamless. It's always the combination of tech and then the human interface. So that I strongly believe in, even in today's world, that great customer experience obviously starts with tech, but the finish comes via managing the human interface, also human to human, still today, professionally and in the right way.
Thanks for sharing. I love the way that what you mentioned is like this multi-channel. I find that I love that, because very often I feel it's very easy, and especially in the world today, we think about customer experience, we think about digital, right? Customer experience digital, customer experience digital. But it's it's at the end of the day, that's what the business wants, right? What the business wants is digital, because that's efficient, that's low cost, and all these kinds of things, which is great. But what does the customer want? Does the customer want purely digital? And maybe yes, but also maybe not. And if we make assumptions about that, we are not customer centric. We are business centric, right? And if we actually truly understand the customer and then create whatever it is, the technology and the interface and the experience and everything towards that customer, now we become customer centric. So I love that distinction that you made there. Now, going a little bit more into the nitty gritty of when you look at customer experience and like what it means to you in terms of like outcomes and how it relates to behaviors of customers, what do you believe needs to be in place? Like just like in general, not just talking about single app or whatever, but I mean customer experience in general at a company. What do you think are some of the main pillars that need to be in place to have customer experience be great?
Yeah, it's an extremely complex thing, and it requires ultimately the entire company. And not just kind of the tech team or just the sales team telling the tech team what to do, or the business or the product managers. I think it's really a mindset and has to be in the culture, and it obviously has to be set top down and bottom up at the same time. I think if you combine top down and bottom up kind of message and frameworks that help to, and processes that help to create that environment, then you're on the right path. I think there's a few traps that you can fall into, and one is to find excuses. I can give you an example about Sygnum, right? How many times have I heard in discussions before product rollouts or even at the definition stage is we cannot make this a great user experience because of the regulatory XYZ, right? So constraints for such as regulation, etc., are often used as excuses to then justify bad user experience, and that I think you have to fight very strongly and just push the organization. No, that cannot be a driver. The second is to really make sure that you listen to the customers, and that you not, and that sounds also so generic, but I mean even not being afraid of exposing at even sometimes weak products to the customers in a controlled way with those that you particularly trust, or so early in the process, to really get the feedback and not assume that we have done all the charting and the flows, etc. Just not assume, but really talk to the customer, which is easier said than done. And I think everyone talks about it, but actually doing it, I think, is a different story. And the third one is that I find very difficult. And if you have a solution or anyone listening, I would love to hear it, because I think we certainly also have to continuously improve on that, is that whole, managing the different skill sets and expertise of those involved in creating, that needed in creating a great user experience and customer experience. Is that on the one hand side, accepting the sales view, a salesperson's view on what the client wants, at the same time understanding what then a product manager or a digital product manager and a business analyst or so, what his or her view is on this, and how you then break it down, and then at the same time obviously what the tech teams bring in. And that often leads to lots of clashes, right? Because different people think very differently about the same problem or challenge, and then sometimes in the communication chain it gets lost in translation, and ultimately it becomes sometimes even an ego game versus, again, keeping the client in focus. And I think managing that and helping to translate, and also as leader accept that I have accepted by now, if I say sentence A to my 220 Sygnumers, there will be about 10 different ways how this very sentence is received. And it can be almost sometimes from one extreme to the other, the opposite. Maybe I'm exaggerating a little bit, but that I think just manifests itself particularly at that creating great customer experience. And given that you need so many different people from different backgrounds who are differently wired, and to create that translation and always founding it on what clients really want, I think is the crux, how to get to create a culture that then leads to great customer experience. That was a convoluted answer, but I hope that just.
No, I love. And there's a couple of things I want to dive into. I'll start backwards from the last thing that you mentioned. So to me, this is such a fascinating dynamic, because I see this every day in projects, right? All the time, at all companies, everywhere, no matter how big or small or what industry, if tech or no tech or whatever. It's so fascinating. And I always compare it to, like, if you put a Swiss, a Chinese, and an American in the same room, and they're supposed to work together, really the tipping point, if it actually even has hope of working together, is not them speaking the same language, but them understanding the language of the other person, right? So if I'm in that room as a Swiss and I do not understand any Chinese and any English, I'm lost completely, right? But if I understand Chinese and I understand English, I'm no longer lost. It doesn't mean that everything they say will be absolutely 100% clear, but I have a chance, and now it's a possibility for me to actually understand and trying to understand what they're saying. And it's such an incredible dynamic, and I see this all day long in all the companies and all the projects. And it's, of course, one of these riddles that is never going to be figured out, because it is a purely human riddle.
Yes. So yeah, you can optimize it, but you can never really truly fix it. And every human being that adds the project then adds another, complexity, which you then have to adjust again to. Yeah.
Absolutely. And, I love it also because there's another side to it, which is like, you have somebody from IT, from product, from digital experience, and from business in the same room. And that's, and then they have different backgrounds and different, come from different cultures as well, and all kinds of other complexities. So it does create a huge amount of complexity, probably also a lot of inefficiency, right? But what I also find interesting is it's kind of like the only way to go to the other side of the dark cave and actually on the other side have that great experience come out, because it's rare that you have 4 business people in the room, all Swiss, and then you come up with the most incredible customer experience, right? It's kind of like that complexity or that dark cave is almost required to come out to get to the hidden treasure on the other side. So I love, it's almost a paradox in a sense, right? They're not contradictions, but I think it's almost a paradox sometimes. And depending on how you look at it, it can be a challenge which is almost insurmountable, or it can be a challenge that is like it just needs to be there in order for the treasure to be harvested, in a sense. And
and that's when magic happens, right? And if you get that, then it leads to magic. That you then can also, when you look at the product, you cannot fully academically or fully rationally explain why this then became a hit or so. That's then exactly that magic on the basis of that complexity having been managed in a way that really made sense, right? So
Absolutely. And just one last thing I want to dive into there is sort of like talk to your customers. And it's so funny, you said, it's kind of generic or simple. Well, it's totally not, right? I mean, because it's not about just talking to customers. It's about internal, gardens and people trying to protect their customers from unfinished products or stuff that's going to potentially annoy them or break a relationship or whatever, right? Or like sometimes when we work with banks, it's like, have you talked to your customers or, customer interviews and things like that? And like, yes, we talk to the RM, so we know everything about the customers. Okay, great. No, we talk about the customers, right? Not the relationship management with the customer. And, and it's such especially in the banking, especially in the private banking world, to me, it's such a fascinating dynamic. And also the topic about regulation and user experience. I recently wrote an article on that topic, like digital client onboarding, regulations versus user experience. To me, the digital client onboarding or the client onboarding in general is the perfect representation of that paradox again, right? Because it's so easy to just go to the side of like, no, like there's no chance, no way, because like just read the law, right? Let's just read it. It says no, right? And then the other side, you have some players who are doing an incredibly good job. And more there's slow but steady awareness towards, maybe we could try that too. Maybe it's not that impossible. And it's interesting, like how much of the worldview of people is a direct reflection of the outcome of the experience. I think this is the most, to me, this is the most fascinating part of any digital experience when it comes to banking.
Actually at Sygnum, we went through that, and we at some point decided we need to build it ourselves because of the constraints and actually realizing that it's such an important process. I mean, it's the first touch point with your prospects and then clients, and that whole flow, even though many would have said and also said, don't do that, it makes us, we just felt we want to iterate, we want to control this, and we want to constantly improve and actually not, accepting these limits as then it has to be bad. But that's an ongoing process.
Yes. So one more thing I want to dive into is management or board buy-in, because very often when I talk to people, also like in middle management at bigger companies, specifically also in the field of innovation, it's incredibly difficult to position innovation stuff that is not going to generate revenue in the next 3 months, with the board, with the management, and and then you go through all the effort and the investment of creating something that has potential, and then it's not on track for a month or so, and then it just goes like, shall we kill it? Shall I just like kill it? And I would love to talk to you about that from the other side of the table. I would love to hear your perspective, and maybe it's a little bit different at Sygnum. I know, you're much more innovative, and you're obviously you're one of the co-founders, so you drive a lot of the company. But I'm still interested to on the other side of the table, like somebody has an innovative idea, somebody wants to pursue something that is maybe not clear where it's going to head, or it just doesn't have the perfect business case right now, but it may have potential. For you to buy into something like that, looking at the other side, like you being the one needs to buying into that, what do you need as a management or board member to go with it, to jump on it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a very good question. I would say probably Sygnum is indeed, just as a pre-comment, is a bit a special case here, because we are, pretty much everything that we do is in some shape or form new. Every new product is kind of also a new, we need to find new product market fit. That's very much part of our culture, of our history. I mean, that's how we started off. It was not there, and then we kind of created that market. The crypto banking as such was not really there, and now when we launch things like NFT platform, etc., there's again new market. How do we go about it? How do we position ourselves? So it's a very common thing for us, and I think generally it has a lot to do with obviously very fundamental topics such as, in the particular company, how does the shareholder structure look like? What is the composition of the board? Are there enough independent board members? Is there kind of potentially conflict of interest by shareholder representatives, etc.? So there's many topics we could talk about. But coming to your specific question, what I need to be able to buy in is one is the acceptance that we're not in an industry, in an era where we can have 5-year business plans. For me, it's the first is to accept that on a quarterly basis, and we live this, we have to review whether we work on the right stuff. And of course, there's long-term infrastructure projects which take 2 years and stuff like that. I'm not talking about that, but just generally, we have a quarterly strategy review actually, and within that, then it's at the same time, if you are so fluid or so agile in your decision making, there needs to be a few things on an 18 months basis or so that you really kind of decide and then stick to. And for example, in our case, it is right now that we want to invest, when it comes to our capex, 80% into our core, and the core has been clearly defined, and 20%, but this also clearly defined, 20% into exactly topics which we believe are second strategic trust of becoming a leading player or a pioneer in creating access to compliant Web3 and DeFi, which is, from a banking perspective, very new, and there's zero revenue generation right now, but we are investing in it heavily, but within the guardrails of the 20%. So once I have, for me, that mind frame of, we have this budget, this capex that we want to spend, 80% has to go there. Whatever happens, we will keep 80% on our core. But then also equally, 20% is for this. And then the mind is already open for, okay, this is what we want to do, because otherwise we will at some point look back and actually be irrelevant because we were just focusing on the core, which can also be the case. And then it's just a process. And then the rest is actually a bit less at the beginning of the cycle, at the ideation case, is actually predominant, deliberately unstructured. That everyone at any point in time can come up with ideas, and only in the second stage it is then we call it the new business board. It comes into a few people then challenging it from a client's etc. perspective, or general market development perspective, and only then it comes into, we call it into the PI planning, where we then prioritize on an epics level. So, but the beginning is extremely unstructured, purposely. And then you just need to have an open mind, but always within that framework of 80-20. So that's how I go about it.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. Like, I love that, because it also, for me, it opened up the context of, if I'm there, right? Like, let's say I'm relating it to a big company now, I'm the head of innovation or the head of digital innovation. And, there's things that are maybe not that 1, 2, 3 easy to describe or put it into a business plan. If I want to position these with top management or the board, one crucial element is to understand those distributions, right? Understanding how does these
Yes.
budget contexts actually look like 2080? What are they for? What purpose are they for? What goals, what vision do they aim for? And then creating whatever I have in that context, basically, so that the relating on the other side is much, much, much easier. Goes back to understanding the other person, right?
Yes.
Understanding,
Exactly.
not speaking the language, but understanding the language at least. I love that. Cool. Thanks for sharing. One last question before we close it is you talked about product market fit. So I'm really curious to dive a little bit more into that. Launching new things, going into new areas, finding a product market fit eventually, right? Because that's kind of like the breaking point in a sense of like where something actually gains momentum and movement versus it dies off. How do you go about finding that product market fit?
Yeah. Yeah, you can do so much, and then there's also many externalities you cannot really influence, right? But I think one, just to maybe start on the opposite, one thing that is important if you want to be a company that at least sometimes find product market fit is to just the ability to say no and to stop things as well, right? So that when you see that an alteration or a product feature or whatever doesn't work, that you then stop without really the sunk cost principle, to really follow it. And it's psychologically very difficult, also for team motivation, etc., right? So it's extremely difficult, but I think it's very important. And then otherwise, it's really, again, the same as mentioned before, to expose it, even though, I mean, it comes from the Silicon Valley, right? If you launch a product, and if you wait as long until you launch a product that you don't feel ashamed of, and when it hits the market first, then something's wrong. Then you're waiting too long. So I don't wanna say that is always true, but you need to just try early so that you can adjust fast. That you don't stay in your internal ideation and let's complete it and make it perfect until you drop it into the market. I think that is a big mistake. So we try to, within the guardrails of what we can as a bank also, which doesn't make that part easy, to just try fast and then, overemphasize it if we see traction, versus then, okay, maybe deprioritize it and not push it further. So far, I must say this has worked quite well for us.
Thanks for sharing that. I love that you made it about the point of like what to actually, not how to go about it in terms of what to do, but what not to do. I love that. Like,
Yes.
cutting out basically the stuff that is doomed to be dead, because as you mentioned, that is huge. Like emotional, investment into an idea. Oh my God, like that can just be like the only thing that keeps something going for years. So that is huge.
Yes.
I think cutting that out is a massive element to actually then succeed with the things that make sense, because then you can reallocate the resources to the stuff that actually makes sense, right? Yeah.
And also the mind space. People will then have the mind space again to figure out true product market fit, versus still kind of trying to get a dead horse going again, right?
Yeah. Argue why it shouldn't be killed versus.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you for that. So the last question I have is like ways more up in the sky in a sense, but I always love to ask that is like, so let's imagine you're 80 years old now, and you're looking back at your life, and you look at how the world has changed and how things have happened and everything. In that moment of time, as you're 80 years old, looking back, what is the thing, or what is the change that you would like to see in the world?
Yeah, given that we're talking about digital, I just give you one element that I'm really deeply, also concerned about, and I hope we'll figure out the right path. And also, I say that also as a father for the next generation, etc. And no, I'm not going to talk about ESG and green energy. Enough people are doing that. It's really how we deal with data, and how how we keep an environment where people, as in humans, have the ability to think and say what they think independently, without being influenced by machines, in the future AI, or generally already now in the Web 2 world, a few siren servers, the big platforms that steer the content, etc. Also the role of the media, etc., which I think is quite questionable, but understandable given the clicks mentality. So I just hope that we'll find a better way to organize information and, also educate people or kids in a way that they, even though everything is digital and there will be metaverse and there will be all these things and there will be AI, etc., that they still ultimately know who they are, what they think is right and wrong, and they can stand there and say that without being influenced, without realizing that they're influenced. And I think this is ultimate freedom, which I think is very much endangered right now. And I think only very few people are realizing it. I certainly do. And I'm worried about that. And if I could look back and then see, okay, we found a way to figure that one out so that people can remain, who they are and have their own opinions and etc., then that's what I would say today.
I love that so much because, sometimes people talk about that, but in a more shallow way. I'm worried about data privacy, right? Or I'm worried about AI taking over the world or whatever. But I think the essence of what you talk about is, in a world of, I think it's not like non-negotiable that we will live in a world of AI and we will live in a world of huge amounts of data compared to today, where it's already like, that, but like so many magnitudes bigger. There's no debating, I think, that this is the world, this is the future. But in that future, actually, as a human, being human, staying human, and staying like human themselves, right? So I love like that essence. I think that's really what you talk about, right? No matter what the world looks like, having that as the cornerstone of humanity still being there, because that's at the end of the day what makes us human, right? It's not like mindless being mindless machines is not what makes us human, right? No, it's something else. So I love that. Matthias, thank you so much for joining us today and being here and sharing all your insights. It's a really, really cool conversation. Thank you, Matthias. Appreciate it.
It was fun. Thank you.